Hi! It's pretty late here, but I thought I would try to finish Chapter 7 of Ender's Game. So this is actually Chapter 7, Part 4. And for me, this is a bedtime story. I don't know what time you are listening at. Salamander Army had a battle 4 days later. Ender followed behind the real soldiers as they jogged along the corridors to the battle room. There were 2 ribbons along the walls, the green, green, brown of Salamander, and the black, white, black of Condor. When they came to the place where the battle room had always been, the corridor split, white, black to the right, or instead of green, green, brown leading to the left and black, black, white to the right, around another turn to the right, and the army stopped in front of a blank wall. The Toons formed up in silence. Ender stayed behind them all. Bonzo gave his instructions. Take the handles and go up. B left, C right, D down. He saw that the Toons were oriented to follow instructions, then added, and you, pinprick, wait 4 minutes, then come just inside the door. Don't even take your gun off your suit. Ender nodded. The wall behind Bonzo became transparent. Not a wall at all then, but a force field. The battle room was different too. Huge brown boxes were suspended in midair, partially obstructing the view. So these were the obstacles that the soldiers called stars. They were distributed seemingly at random. Bonzo seemed not to care where they were. Apparently the soldiers already knew how to handle the stars. But it soon became clear to Ender, as he sat and watched the battle from the corridor, that they did not know how to handle the stars. They did not know how to soft land on one and use it for cover. The tactics of assaulting the enemy's position on a star. They showed no sense at all as to which stars mattered. They persisted in assaulting stars that could have been bypassed by wall sliding to a more advanced position. The other commander was taking advantage of Bonzo's neglect of strategy. Condor Army forced the salamanders into costly assaults. Fewer and fewer salamanders were unfrozen for the attack on the next star. It was clear, after only 4 minutes, that Salamander Army could not defeat the enemy by attacking. Ender stepped through the gate. He drifted silently downward. The battle rooms he had practiced in always had the doors at floor level. For real battles, however, the door was in the middle of the wall, as far from the floor as the ceiling. Abruptly, he felt himself reorient, as he had in the shuttle. What had been down was now up and now sideways. In Nello, there was no reason to stay oriented the way he had been in the corridor. It was impossible to tell, looking at the perfect square doors, which way had been up. And it didn't matter, for now, Ender had found the orientation that made sense. The enemy's gate was down. The object of the game was to fall towards the enemy's home. Ender made the motions that oriented him to the new direction. Instead of being spread out, his whole body presented to the enemy. Now Ender's legs pointed towards them. He was a much smaller target. Someone saw him. He was, after all, drifting aimlessly in the open. Instinctively, he pulled his legs up under him. At that moment, he was flashed, and the legs of his suit froze in that position. His arms remained unfrozen, for without a direct body hit, only the limbs that were shot froze up. It occurred to Ender that if he had not been presenting his legs to the enemy, it would have been his body they hit. He would have been immobilized. Since Bonzo had ordered him not to draw his weapon, Ender continued to drift, not moving his head or arms as if they had been frozen too. The enemy ignored him and concentrated their fire on the soldiers who were firing at them. It was a bitter battle. Outnumbered now, Salamander Army gave ground stubbornly. The battle disintegrated into a dozen individual shootouts. Bonzo's discipline paid off now, for each salamander that froze took at least one enemy with him. No one ran or panicked. Everyone remained calm and aimed carefully. Petra was especially deadly. Condor Army noticed it and took great effort to freeze her. They froze her shooting arm first, and her stream of curses was only interrupted when they froze her completely and the helmet clamped down on her jaw. In a few minutes it was over. Salamander Army offered no more resistance. Ender noted with pleasure that Condor could not muster the minimal 5 soldiers necessary to open the gate to victory. 4 of them touched their helmets to the lighted spots at the corners of Salamander's door, while the 5th passed through the force field. That ended the game. The lights came back on to their full brightness, and Anderson came out of the teacher door. I could have drawn my gun, thought Ender, as the enemy approached the door. I could have drawn my gun and shot just one of them, and they would have been too few. The game would have been a draw. Without 4 men to touch the 4 corners and a fifth man to pass through the gate, Condor would have no victory. Bonzo, you ass! I could have saved you from this defeat. Maybe even turned it into a victory, since they'd be sitting here, easy targets, and they wouldn't have known at first where the shots were coming from. I'm a good enough shot for that. But orders were orders, and Ender had promised to obey. He did get some satisfaction out of the fact that on the official tally, Salamander Army recorded not the expected 41 disabled or eliminated, but rather 40 eliminated and 1 damaged. Bonzo couldn't understand it until he consulted Anderson's book and realized who it was. I was only damaged, Bonzo, thought Ender. I could still shoot. He expected Bonzo to come to him and say, next time, when it's like that, you can shoot. But Bonzo didn't say anything to him at all until the next morning after breakfast. Of course, Bonzo ate in the commander's mess, but Ender was pretty sure the odd scorers would cause as much a stir there as it did in the soldiers' dining hall. In every other game that wasn't a draw, every member of the losing team was either eliminated totally, frozen, or disabled, which means they had some body parts left unfrozen, but they were unable to shoot or inflict damage on the enemy. Salamander was the only losing army with 1 man in damaged but active category. Ender volunteered no explanation, but the other members of Salamander Army let it be known why it had happened, and the other boys asked him why he hadn't disobeyed orders and fired. He calmly answered, I obey orders. After breakfast, Bonzo looked at him. The order still stands, he said, and don't you forget it. It will cost you, you fool. You may not be a good soldier, but I can still help, and there's no reason you shouldn't let me. But Ender said nothing. An interesting side effect of the battle was that Ender emerged at the top of the soldier efficiency list. Since he hadn't fired a shot, he had a perfect record on shooting, no misses at all. And since he had never been eliminated or disabled, his percentage was excellent. No one else came close. It made a lot of boys laugh. The others were angry. But on the prized efficiency list, Ender was now the leader. He kept sitting out the army practice sessions and kept working hard on his own, with Petra in the mornings and his friends at night. More launchies were joining them now, not on a lark, but because they could see results. They were getting better and better. Ender and Eli stayed ahead of them, though, in part, it was because Eli kept trying new things, which forced Ender to think of new tactics to cope with them. In part, it was because they kept making stupid mistakes, which suggested things to do that no self-respecting, well-trained soldier would ever have tried. Many of the things they attempted turned out to be useless, but it was always fun, always exciting, and enough things worked out that they knew it was helping them. Evening was the best time of day. The next 2 battles were easy Salamander victories. Ender came in after 4 minutes and remained untouched by the defeated enemy. Ender began to realize that Condor Army, which had beaten them, was unusually good. Salamander, weak as Bonzo's grasp of strategy might be, was one of the better teams, climbing steadily in the ratings, clawing at 4th place with Rat Army. Ender turned 7. They weren't much for dates and calendars at Battle School, but Ender found out how to bring up the date on his desk, and he noticed his birthday. The school noticed it too. They took his measurements and issued him a new Salamander uniform and new flash suit for the battle room. He went back to the barracks with the new clothing. It felt strange and loose, like his skin no longer fit properly. He wanted to stop at Petra's bunk and tell her about his home, about what his birthdays were usually like. Just tell her it was his birthday so she'd say something about it being a happy one. But nobody told birthdays. It was childish. It was what Landsiders did. Cakes and silly customs. Valentine baked him his cake on his 6th birthday. It fell, and it was terrible. Nobody knew how to cook anymore. It was the kind of thing Valentine would do. Everybody teased Valentine about it, but Ender saved a little bit of it in his cupboard. Then they took out his monitor, and he left, and for all he knew, it was still there, a little piece of greasy yellow dust. Nobody talked about home. Not among the soldiers. There had been no life before Battle School. Nobody got letters, and nobody wrote any. Everybody pretending that they didn't care. But I do care, thought Ender. The only reason I'm here is so that a bugger won't shoot out Valentine's eye, won't blast her head open like the soldiers in the videos of the first battles with the buggers, won't split her head with a beam so hot that her brains burst the skull and spill out like rising bread dough, the way it happens in my worst nightmares. In my worst nights, when I am awake and trembling but silent, must keep silent, or they'll hear that I miss my family. I want to go home. It was better in the morning. Home was merely a dull ache in the back of his memory, a tiredness in his eyes. That morning, Bonzo came as they were dressing. "Flash suits," he called. It was a battle. Ender's fourth game. The enemy was Leopard Army. It would be easy. Leopard was new, and it was among the bottom quarter in the standings. It had been organized only 6 months ago, with Pol Slattery as its commander. Ender put on his new battle suit and got into line. Bonzo pulled him roughly out of line and made him march at the end. "You don't need to do that," Ender said silently. "You could have let me stay in line." Ender watched from the corridor. Pol Slattery was young, but he was sharp. He had some new ideas. He kept his soldiers moving, darting from star to star, wall sliding to get behind and above the stolid salamanders. Ender smiled. Bonzo was hopelessly confused, and so were his men. Leopard seemed to have men in every direction. However, the battle was not as lopsided as it seemed. Ender noticed that Leopard was losing a lot of men too. Their reckless tactics exposed them too much. When maneuvered, however, what mattered, however, was that Salamander felt defeated. They had surrendered the initiative completely. Though they were still fairly evenly unmatched with the enemy, they huddled together like the last survivors of a massacre, as if they hoped the enemy would overlook them in the carnage. Ender slipped slowly through the gate, oriented himself so the enemy gate was down, and drifted slowly eastward to the corner where he wouldn't be noticed. He even fired at his own legs to hold them in a kneeling position that offered him the best protection. He looked to any casual glance like another frozen soldier who was drifting helplessly out of the battle. With Salamander Army waiting abjectly for destruction, Leopard obligingly destroyed them. When Salamander finally stopped firing, Leopard had 9 boys left. They formed up and started to open the Salamander gate. Ender aimed carefully with his straight arm, as Petra had taught him. Before anyone knew what was happening, he froze 3 of their soldiers who were about to press their helmets against the lighted corners of the door. Then some of the others spotted him and fired, but at first they hit only his already frozen legs. It gave him time to get the last 2 men at the gate. Leopard only had 4 men left, unfrozen, when Ender was finally able to hit in the arm and disabled. The game was a draw, and they had never hit him in the body. Pol Slattery was furious, but there had been nothing unfair about it. Everyone in Leopard Army assumed that it had been a strategy of Bonzo's to leave a man till the last minute. It didn't occur to them that little Ender had fired against orders, but Salamander Army knew. Bonzo knew, and Ender could see from the way the commander looked at him that Bonzo hated him for rescuing him from total defeat. "I don't care," Ender told himself. "It will just make me easier to trade away, and in the meantime, you won't drop so far in the standings. Just trade me. I've learned all I am going to ever learn from you. How to fail with style. That's what you know, Bonzo." What have I learned so far? Ender listed things in his mind as he undressed by his bunk. The enemy's gate is down. Use my legs as a battle shield. A small reserve held back until the end of the game can be decisive, and soldiers can sometimes make decisions that are smarter than the orders they're given. Naked, he was about to climb into bed when Bonzo came towards him, his face hard and set. I have seen Peter like this, Ender thought, silent with murder in his eyes. But Bonzo is not Peter. Bonzo has more fear. "Wigan, I finally traded you. I was able to persuade Rat Army that your incredible place on the efficiency list is more than an accident. You go there tomorrow." "Thank you, sir," Ender said. Perhaps he sounded too grateful. Suddenly Bonzo swung at him, caught his jaw in a vicious, open-handed slap. It knocked Ender sideways into his bunk, and he almost fell. Then Bonzo slugged him hard in the stomach. Ender dropped to his knees. "You disobeyed me," Bonzo said, loudly for all to hear. "No good soldier ever disobeys." Even as he cried from the pain, Ender could not help but take vengeful pleasure in the murmurs he heard rising through the barracks. "You fool, Bonzo. You aren't enforcing discipline, you're destroying it." They No, I turned defeat into a draw, and now they see how you repay me. You made yourself look stupid in front of everyone. What is your discipline worth now? The next day, Ender told Petra that for her sake, the shooting practice in the morning would have to end. Bonzo didn't need anything that looked like a challenge now, and so she'd have to stay clear of Ender for a while. She understood perfectly. Besides, she said, you're as close to being a good shot as you'll ever be. He left his desk and flash suit in the locker. He would wear a salamander uniform until he could get into the commissary and change for the brown and black of Rat. He had brought no possessions with him. He would take none away. There was none to have. Everything of value was in the school computer or in his own head and hands. He used one of the public desks in the game room to register for the Earth Gravity Personal Combat course during the hour immediately after breakfast. He didn't plan to get vengeance on Bonzo for hitting him, but he did intend that no one would be able to do that to him again.